we can begin our presentation. We are going to have a 1-hour workshop. We're talking about the future of nightlife, liberty, data, and technology. So those are three interlocking, interwoven themes. My name is Michael Fichman. I am one of your presenters. My co-presenter, Mark Adam Harold. We'll introduce ourselves a little more formally in a second. But I wanted to mention that we're grateful to the various organizations who helped us put this workshop together. Vilnius Night Alliance, Vibe Lab, PennPraxis, my employer, 24 Hour Philadelphia, and the Global Nighttime Recovery Plan, of which I'm an editor and Mark is a habitual contributor. To begin, I am a city planner at PennPraxis, which is part of the University of Pennsylvania's Weitzman School of Design. I am a lecturer and a researcher, but before that, I'm a music professional, and so I've sort of taken what I learned and observed on the inside of working in music and being a touring DJ and traveling a lot over the last several decades, and sort of brought that what I've learned on the inside and then tried to bring it together with some fields of professional practice that have some ways of helping advocate for or describe the industry in new ways. And this will be part of the subject of the presentation. And I'll let Mark introduce himself as well. Gosh.
Hi, I'm Matt.
I haven't had enough coffee. It's very early here.
Martin's early in the morning. I'm late in the afternoon. I'm British. You can tell from my accent, but I'm in Vilnius in Lithuania, which is in Eastern Europe. I've lived here for 16 years, and I came over here for the music and for the musicians, and kind of stayed. So now I'm a 16-year immigrant. And part of what I was doing was making a lot of events that were tending to attract the attention of the police a bit too much. So someone suggested I should try getting elected to the city council so that I could change the noise laws. And that joke got a bit serious, got a bit out of hand, and I actually got elected to the council. And then that was when I met Lutz and Mirik from Vibe Lab. And we did an analysis of Vilnius night economy. And out of that analysis we identified the need to have an organization that would defend nightlife in Vilnius. So I left the council at the end of my term of office and set up that organization, which is Vilnius Night Alliance. We're a small collection of the best and most culturally significant venues in Vilnius. And we advocate for social and economic and cultural value of nightlife. So I'm constantly talking to politicians and trying to convince them that we're not just having orgies and taking drugs, although we kind of sometimes do that, sometimes. But anyway, I'll pass back to Michael before I embarrass myself and Lithuania, my adopted country, anymore.
Thank you, Mark. You know, it occurs to me, most Friday mornings I teach a lecture with my colleague Matt Harris, and I think I'm probably going to start calling him Mark by accident next time we get back together. Okay, so, I'm going to go forward 2 slides and then 1 slide back here to give you the agenda of what we're going to do in this workshop. So we've introduced ourselves. That's the first thing. Then we're going to take a moment and everyone can fill out a small survey that we've prepared that is a little bit of a springboard for discussion topics and exercises that we're going to do later in the workshop. We're going to give you a little bit of background about data and technology and liberty and privacy as they relate to nightlife. And then we'll do two short exercises which hopefully stimulate you to think about some of the issues that that are meaningful to you in your city, in your professional practice, in your community, in your art scene, whatever the case may be. So we have a survey, the link to which I can post in the chat here. If Nick has, I think Nick may have done that already. I'm not sure. I will post it here. Can everyone see this? And we can take a few moments. The survey should take you no longer than 1 to 2 minutes, and we can fill it out, and then the results will be something that will allow us to prompt our discussion a little later. So please take a couple moments, check out the link in the chat, and take the survey.
Did you not bring any music, Michael?
I didn't. I mean, I could have a guitar I could play, but I don't know.
Get the Rhodes out.
Get the Rhodes out. Could be done.
Can you see results coming in?
They should take a few moments to populate. I don't have the Google sheet in front of me, but I do have the link to it in my code.
At least one person in the chat says done, so it must be working.
Yes, and hello, Jocelyn. Nice to see you.
And hi, Alicia.
Yes, as well.
Okay, it's working.
All right, great. So we can move forward, and then we'll check on the results in several moments here. Okay, so data, technology, and liberty in nightlife. So there are opportunities presented by technology and the ubiquity of data in our modern world, and there are threats. And with nightlife, it's not altogether that much different as it is with our day-to-day life. There are enormous efficiencies and conveniences that technology offers us, and there are also ways in which it can be incredibly compromising to one's privacy or can dominate one's life to an uncomfortable degree. This is the story of our modern world, and so the question is really, do we want to make an engaged and smart use of these tools to bring about beneficial ends, or do we want to retreat from engaging with them entirely, and then the outcomes are kind of out of our hands, because this is just the world that we are living in. And so it's important to take some agency in terms of making these technologies, data, and the issues, the political issues related to them, take the bull by the horns, as one says. Technology offers opportunities for new post-COVID freedoms. This is something that Mark is going to talk about. And the ability to present yourself as somebody who's been vaccinated when you are crossing a border or getting into a nightclub. Governments are either mandating these things or people are demanding them, and there are other ways in which these things can be potentially a threat to one's privacy, because they increasingly reveal your preferences, behavior, travel, and other things. So there's a gray area in which the optimal kind of solutions probably sit, and those solutions are not the same for every person, community, place, country, etc. So I will let Mark talk a little bit about data, technology, and liberty, and I'll take a back seat here and analyze some of the survey results.
Okay, so while Michael is geeking out with his code stuff, which he's going to show you later, I'll just run through a few of the scenarios that we've come up with during the pandemic and what we might have in the future. So the first one that everyone knows about was the location tracking apps and various systems that happened when health agencies wanted to check who was having a contact with who. So there was a very simple way of doing that, which was complete rubbish and useless, which was people were writing down their names and addresses on bits of paper with dirty pens, and those bits of paper were supposed to be stored somewhere and supposed to be used later for searching who was in a restaurant with you when you had the virus. Obviously, that's completely useless. What we did in Vilnius, the government really didn't want to have any of this system because they kind of couldn't be bothered to do the work to trace people. So they didn't want to collect data and then have the responsibility to use that data, which was kind of weird. But we were arguing that it was a good way of staying open and being safe. So we built our own system, which worked on SMS. And every time people were going into our venues, our members' venues, and any other venue that wanted to join the scheme, they were just scanning an upcode and sending an SMS saying, I'm in bar X. And then we collected 60,000 visits to bars in Vilnius. And the government did absolutely nothing with the data at all. As I said, the problem can be when, with all of this data, we kind of think that it's dangerous to give away all our data to these evil governments and companies. But actually, the problem can be that they have so much data they don't know what to do with it, or they don't have the resources to do anything with it. So 0 people were tracked by our tracking system. The UK, on the other end of the scale, spent, I don't know how, 40 billion pounds developing a system, an app that also didn't work. We saved 50 billion by doing it with SMS, which took 1 weekend for me and another guy to program. So that's about the tracking. There's also now coming on these vaccine and test certificates, supposedly to reopen earlier before there's herd immunity, before we've cured the virus, to make sure everyone inside the venue is relatively safe and can maybe take their mask off. People are being asked to prove that they've had a vaccine. This obviously involves revealing your identity and your health records. So there's issues around that. I've put in another one here, air filters and ventilation. This is another solution to the problem, which doesn't require collecting any data. And I haven't seen much action on this one. We haven't convinced the Lithuanian government to use this at all, but there are air filters that kill the virus and could clean the air inside a venue. And then maybe you wouldn't need to have the location tracking or other things. So sometimes there's other ways around the problem. You don't always have to collect data. After the pandemic, for sure, data collection is going to still be a thing. Michael's going to be talking soon about how we need data in nightlife advocacy. Whenever I'm talking to politicians, every time they ask for the numbers. Sometimes they don't believe the numbers, sometimes they don't use the numbers properly, but they always ask. So we're going to need to find ways of collecting more and more data and information. And also a big topic for me is harm reduction. We need to know where people are using what substances and develop strategies and focus on certain areas and on certain drugs or on alcohol, so that we can try and reduce the harm from that. Because one of the big reasons our industry gets attacked is because you get one person having a drunken accident or one person overdosing, and that affects the whole industry, and we all get told we have to shut down at midnight. So I think that's a really big reason why we need to collect data on people's uses of different substances. So there you go. I'll pass back to Michael now. He's going to show the survey results.
All right, so let me show to you something that, will seem unduly nerdy, but there's a reason why I'm doing this. What I'm showing you here is basically 100 lines of computer code that somebody at your local university could probably put together, and it just takes your information from a Google Sheet and analyzes some of these questions very quickly. And it's something that I am going to put up and make available to you. That's is a take-home goodie from this. But quickly, we have people from across Northern Europe, one person from Southeast Asia. We have 3 people here from the United States. It looks like someone in the Midwest, someone in the West Coast, and I think that's me in Philadelphia. And your responses in regards to data privacy issues. For each of the questions, there's some variation in what people are saying they are concerned about. People seem to have the lowest level of concern about COVID testing results, the highest level of concern about credit card receipts, strongly concerned is the plurality there, strongly concerned about GPS location data, and then more mixed reports about ticketing receipts and transport ticket records. These kinds of survey results are not necessarily indicative of what everybody feels, but give an indication that there is some variety about the things that people are concerned about, number one. And number two, it's very simple to collect simple data with a simple form. And we're going to come back to this time and time again, that measuring people's sentiments is kind of a good way to both understand your community and also generate some advocacy. So I want to talk to you a little bit about data and its ability to empower people. So in my experience, politicians and society respond to groups that make data-informed arguments. That's something that Mark was saying. But nightlife is really hard to measure. So there are lots of data out there, but you need to know how to use them. And when I say that nightlife is hard to measure, I mean that economic census data don't tend to count people in terms of like, is this a nighttime business use or a daytime business use? And facts and figures reflect the things that are important to the people that collect them. And for the most part, the people who are collecting data, economists, government officials, etc., are not that interested in nighttime. So they're not asking specific questions which might interest you. And so that means that sometimes you have to create your own data to tell the stories that matter but are not measured, right? So that survey that we just did, those are questions an economist might not think to ask you about economic activity, or a public health expert might not think to ask you about technology and privacy and COVID testing results. But that might matter to you because you are thinking about what happens if I go to a nightclub that is frequented by groups that are socially not tolerated in my country, and I have to like make a data record of that, right? That is something that we think about that might not occur to other people. Using data well involves building a coalition of stakeholders and skills. So I showed you that computer code not necessarily to show off, but to suggest to you that there's probably somebody at a university near you, or probably somebody who goes to the club that you like to frequent, who's a software engineer or a city planner or works with economic data at a bank, or you don't know what, that can help you with some of the technical aspects of what you're working on. And the last thing I would say is that evidence is worthless if you cannot communicate it effectively. The hardest part of any of data-related process is trying to distill it into a clear, concise, and short argument that a policy person or the public is responsive to when you have to make an argument with the evidence that you found. How do you make it into a kind of chart or map or whatever it is that you need that you can put onto Instagram or put into a one-page document that you can give to somebody on your town council and make a quick argument to somebody who has very limited time or an understanding of your world. So I'll give you a few examples of great data resources or studies or examples out there before we, get into our exercise. So first thing, the London Nighttime Data Observatory. This is a site set up by the City of London, which collects a lot of government data that relate to nighttime from across their government and puts it in one place. And this is an example of what we call open data, which for the last 15 years in many countries, there have been transparency laws and movements to bring the data that the government collects that does not have a strong privacy related component, and make it available. So this is, you can analyze it, you can search for things, and then you can use those things to inform some of the arguments you want to make or the questions you might want to ask. Unfortunately, many places do not necessarily have this nighttime specific data like London has. There's been a lot of advocacy there that has brought this about. There are community type studies, one of which I've been involved in with Lutz and Mirek for many years, is called the Creative Footprint Project, where we have gone out in New York, Berlin, Tokyo, and some other places to more reduced degree, and we went around and tried to find where all the venues are and asked some things about what kind of content is there, and then that lets us, you know, in New York, for example, we were able to show the places that have the most experimental content are the places that are in the most at risk of gentrification. And this involved, you know, having a university students who were working for me who could put some of the maps together. It's a little, it's, you know, has some complexity to it, but it was a community process at the heart. So that is also a kind of option. And this allows you to build what we call indicators as well, where you are like, we have this many venues per square kilometer. These neighborhoods have the highest number of venues, or these neighborhoods have the highest average experimental content scores, and build our own indicators so we can track the health of what's going on in the nighttime economy in New York. The Global Nighttime Recovery Plan, as Lutz and Mirek mentioned, I'm an editor of that project. There are a number of things that are contained in the Global Nighttime Recovery Plan that you might be able to pick out as tools that are useful to you. Chapter 7, which will be coming out soon, is about data primarily. And then this is an effort that I was involved in my hometown of Philadelphia. 24 Hour Philadelphia is an organization that I founded. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we put together a survey where we asked people about the things that matter to them in the nighttime economy. What are the here are the 10 or 15 things people always say are problems. Can you rank them as what's the most serious problem? Here are a bunch of things that we think about as being our values that are important to the nightlife community. Please rank them. And we found out things about whether people favor later closing times, whether people want certain legislation repealed, whether people are thinking about moving. And then fast forward to this year, I was a part of the Arts and Culture Task Force for the city of Philadelphia, and the top 3 values, inclusivity, safety, and creativity from the survey, those are the 3 principles in the mission statement of the Philadelphia Nighttime Economy Office that we proposed to City Council. So the ongoing community engagement and data collection is something that allows you to be prepared for when you have the opportunity to participate in a policy discussion. Okay, so let's, I want to look quickly at some of the survey results that have to do with well, I can just tell you the survey results about the scene health rather than share my screen again. We have about the vast majority of the folks in this talk said there's less than 25% of the baseline economic activity going on in their city. So most people have little to no nighttime economic activity. And the reason that I mentioned that we did that question is like, that is a really simple question to give you a piece of, I guess, ammunition, I'd say, when you go talk to the policymaker. Because the exercise we're going to do is to try to animate. First exercise, we're talking about animating action using data. So the challenge is, how do you explain to your local council or mayor that nightlife needs help? So that question is like a good example to get us started. The question was, how much economic activity is going on in your city? Now, maybe that's not the question you'd want to ask of people in the city to like make an estimate in their minds, but it's an example of a data point that you could use, and you say, look, most of the people that we surveyed, I don't know, hundreds of people, said that they're doing less than 25% of the economic activity that they did in 2019. And that points to me that there's a very serious problem, and you should probably think about policy A, B, and C. So here's the exercise we're going to do, and I'm going to allow, you can put information in the chat, or you can put, you can just speak, you know, as you see, as an idea comes to your mind. We're going to try to identify a question or issue